Some streets looked too peaceful to hide anything dark. Willow Creek Lane was one of those streets. It sat on the edge of a small town called Fairhaven, a place with maybe 6,000 people, one main road, and a diner that had been open since 1962. The houses on Willow Creek Lane were modest but well kept. Lawns were mowed on Saturdays. Kids rode bikes until the streetlights came on. Neighbors waved at each other from their porches, and everyone seemed to know everyone else's name. At the far end of the street, in a house with pale blue shutters and a garden full of tomato plants, lived a man named Raymond Osler. Raymond was 52 years old. He worked as a hardware store clerk in town, a job he had held for almost 20 years. He was the kind of man people described using the same 3 or 4 words: quiet, polite, reliable, kind. He fixed things for elderly neighbors without asking for payment. He remembered birthdays. He brought soup to sick families. When new people moved onto the street, Raymond was often the first to knock on their door with a plate of homemade cookies and a warm smile. Nobody on Willow Creek Lane locked their doors at night. Fairhaven simply wasn't that kind of town, and Raymond Osler simply wasn't that kind of man. Or so everyone believed. For years, Fairhaven had been quiet in a different way too. It had almost no serious crime. The local police department mostly handled traffic violations, noise complaints, and the occasional bar fight outside Mickey's Tavern on a Friday night. The idea that anything terrible could happen here felt to most residents almost impossible. That sense of safety began to crack in the spring when a young woman named Della Marsh stopped showing up for her shifts at the diner. Della was 24. She had grown up in Fairhaven, moved away for a few years, and come back 6 months earlier to be closer to her aging mother. She was well liked at the diner, known for remembering regular customers' orders and for the way she always found something kind to say, even on hard days. When Della missed 2 shifts in a row without calling, her manager assumed she was sick. When she missed a 3rd shift, he called her phone. It rang and rang. No answer. Her mother said she hadn't heard from Della in 4 days, which was unusual, since the 2 of them spoke almost every evening. At first, the police treated it as a simple missing persons case. Young adults sometimes leave without telling anyone, they said. Maybe she went to visit a friend. Maybe she needed space. These things happen. But something about this case felt different from the start, even to officers who had seen dozens of missing persons reports over the years. Della's car was still parked outside her apartment. Her purse with her wallet, keys, and phone charger was sitting on her kitchen counter. Her phone itself was turned off, its last known location placed somewhere near the edge of town, close to a wooded area that bordered Willow Creek Lane. Nobody had seen her leave. Nobody had heard anything unusual. It was as if she had simply vanished into the quiet of an ordinary Tuesday evening. Within a week, search parties were formed. Volunteers walked through fields and along the creek that gave the street its name. Flyers with Della's photograph appeared on telephone poles and shop windows across town. Her face, smiling in a photo taken at a friend's birthday party, stared out from behind glass doors at the pharmacy, the grocery store, and the post office. Raymond Osler was one of the volunteers who showed up to help search. He walked the woods with the others, calling Della's name into the trees. He brought bottled water for tired searchers. He offered his garage as a place to store extra flyers and supplies. Neighbors later remembered how helpful he had been, how concerned he seemed, how he had said more than once that he hoped they would find her safe. Nobody had any reason to look at him twice. But somewhere beneath that helpful, familiar face, something had already begun to unravel. And in the weeks that followed, Fairhaven would learn just how wrong they had been about the quiet man at the end of Willow Creek Lane. What the town didn't yet know was that Della Marsh would not be the only name added to a growing list of the missing. And when investigators finally connected the dots, the truth would be far closer to home than anyone in Fairhaven could have imagined. Welcome back to Shelby's Den, the place where we dig into the cases that never made national headlines, but absolutely should have. If you're new here, we cover unsolved mysteries, cold cases, and stories that fell through the cracks of true crime coverage. So if that's your thing, hit subscribe and ring that bell, because we've got a lot more of these coming. Now, let's get back to the story. 3 weeks after Della Marsh disappeared, a second woman went missing from Fairhaven. Her name was Corinne Whitfield, a 31-year-old nurse who worked night shifts at the regional hospital about 20 minutes outside of town. Corinne lived alone in a small rental house on the opposite side of Fairhaven from Willow Creek Lane, but she was known to walk her dog along the creek path most evenings before her shifts began. One evening, her neighbor noticed Corinne's dog scratching at her own front door alone without a leash. When the neighbor knocked on Corinne's door and got no answer, she called the police. Corinne's co-workers said she had never missed a shift without calling in advance. Her family said the same thing. Just like with Della, her phone was found switched off, and her last known location traced back to somewhere near the same wooded area at the edge of town. 2 women, same town, same age range. Same disappearance pattern, same silence afterward. This time, the police could not call it a coincidence. A joint task force was formed between the Fairhaven Police Department and detectives from the State's Bureau of Criminal Investigation. Leading the case was Detective Marian Alves, a sharp, methodical investigator with almost 15 years of experience working violent crimes in larger cities, before transferring to a quieter post near her hometown. She had seen patterns like this before, and she did not like what she was seeing now. When 2 people go missing in the same small area, using the same kind of routine, and nobody sees or hears anything. Detective Alves told a local reporter during a brief press conference, "That tells us this isn't random. Someone is choosing these victims. Someone knows this town well enough to move through it without being noticed." The words, "someone knows this town," sent a ripple of fear through Fairhaven that no one had felt before. For the first time in living memory, people began locking their doors at night. Parents started walking their children to the bus stop instead of letting them go alone. Groups of neighbors organized nightly patrols along the creek path, carrying flashlights and walkie-talkies, checking in with each other every 20 minutes. Raymond Osler joined one of these patrol groups. He walked the creek path 3 nights a week with 2 other neighbors, sweeping his flashlight across the bushes, checking behind parked cars. Report anything unusual to the non-emergency police line. His fellow patrol members would later describe him as calm under pressure, someone who seemed to genuinely want to keep the neighborhood safe. One neighbor, a retired school teacher named Vivian Hurst, remembered a conversation she had with Raymond during one of these patrols. "He said something that stuck with me," Vivian later told investigators. "He said, 'Whoever's doing this must be someone we'd never expect.' That's usually how it goes. At the time, I thought he meant it as a warning. I didn't think anything more of it." Detective Alves and her team worked around the clock. They reviewed security footage from every gas station, convenience store, and traffic camera within a 5-mile radius. They interviewed dozens of residents. They built a timeline of both women's last known movements, trying to find the exact point where their paths might have crossed with someone else's. The wooded area at the edge of town, where both women's phones had last pinged a cell tower, became the focus of an extensive ground search. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Officers walked grid patterns through the trees for days. They found nothing, no bodies, no clothing, no clear signs of struggle. It was as if the two women had walked into the woods and simply stopped existing. The lack of evidence was, in its own way, deeply unsettling. A messy crime scene tells investigators something. A clean one tells them they are dealing with someone patient, someone careful, someone who had likely planned this for a long time before ever acting on it. "Whoever we're looking for," Detective Alves said in a private briefing with her team, "isn't panicking. That should worry us more than anything else." Meanwhile, on Willow Creek Lane, life tried to continue as normally as it could under the weight of growing fear. Neighbors still waved from their porches, though a little more cautiously now. Children still played outside, though usually within sight of a parent's window. And Raymond Osler still tended his tomato garden every evening, exactly as he always had, greeting anyone who passed by with the same warm, familiar smile. But behind that smile, Detective Alves's investigation was about to take a turn that would lead her, slowly and carefully, straight to his front door. What she would find there would confirm every fear this small town had been too afraid to say out loud. Investigations rarely break open all at once. More often, they unravel slowly, one small thread pulled loose until the whole pattern becomes visible. For Detective Alves, that first thread came from an unexpected source, a receipt. While reviewing Della Marsh's bank records for a third time, a junior analyst on the task force noticed a small charge from a hardware store in town made 2 days before Della disappeared. The purchase itself was unremarkable, a package of gardening gloves and a bag of potting soil, totaling less than $20 at first. Nobody thought much of it. Della's mother later confirmed that her daughter had been helping her plant a small garden that spring. It seemed like nothing more than routine shopping. But Detective Alves, thorough as always, requested the security footage from that hardware store for the day of the purchase, simply to close the loop and confirm the timeline. What she found made her sit up straight. The footage showed Della at the checkout counter, chatting briefly with the clerk before leaving the store. The clerk behind the counter, visible clearly in the footage, was Raymond Osler. This alone meant very little. Raymond worked at that hardware store, and Della was a local resident. It was entirely normal for the two of them to have crossed paths there. Small towns work this way. Nearly everyone eventually passes through the same handful of businesses. Still, Detective Alves made a note of it and moved on, cross-referencing other footage and financial records as part of her routine process. 2 days later, while reviewing Corinne Whitfield's records with the same careful eye, she found something that made her pause a second time. Corinne, too, had made a small purchase at the same hardware store just 5 days before she disappeared. She had bought a replacement bulb for her porch light. And once again, the security footage showed the same clerk behind the counter, Raymond Osler. 2 missing women, 2 visits to the same small hardware store, 2 encounters with the same employee in the days shortly before each of them vanished. It could still be coincidence. Fairhaven had only one hardware store, and nearly every resident shopped there at some point. Detective Alves knew better than to jump to conclusions based on 2 data points alone. But she also knew better than to ignore a pattern simply because it felt uncomfortable to consider. She began quietly pulling more information. She requested employment records for the hardware store, cross-referencing Raymond's work schedule against both women's last known movements. She discovered that Raymond had worked the day shift on both occasions when the women made their purchases, meaning he would have had direct contact with each of them, however brief. She also learned something else. Raymond Osler had lived in Fairhaven his entire life. He knew the town, its back roads, its wooded areas, its quiet corners, better than almost anyone else on the task force. If someone wanted to move unseen through Fairhaven, Few people would be better equipped to do it than a man who had walked its streets for over 5 decades. Still, none of this was proof of anything. A friendly clerk who happened to interact with 2 women before their disappearances was, on its own, thin ground for any kind of accusation. Detective Alves knew that acting too quickly without solid evidence could destroy the investigation and unfairly damage an innocent man's life. So she did what good investigators do. She watched, and she waited, and she dug deeper. She requested Raymond's phone records discreetly through proper legal channels. She began mapping his known movements against the timeline of both disappearances. She reached out to former co-workers and old acquaintances, asking careful, indirect questions about Raymond's history, his relationships, his past. It was during one of these conversations that Detective Alves heard something that changed the entire shape of her investigation. A former co-worker, speaking cautiously and asking not to be quoted directly, mentioned that Raymond had once dated a woman years ago, back when he was in his 20s, who had also disappeared without explanation. Detective Alves felt something cold settle in her chest. She thanked the co-worker, ended the call, and immediately pulled up the county's old case archives, searching for any record of a missing persons report involving Raymond Osler, dating back nearly 30 years. What she found waiting in that file would confirm her worst suspicions and set the entire investigation on a course that no one in Fairhaven could have predicted. The file Detective Alves pulled was old, faded, and nearly forgotten. It had been sitting in the county archive for almost 30 years, its pages slightly yellowed, its ink beginning to fade at the edges. The name on the file was Sandra Kepler. Sandra had been 22 years old when she disappeared, almost 3 decades earlier. According to the report, she had been dating a young man named Raymond Osler at the time, then only 24 himself. The two had been seen together frequently in the weeks before her disappearance. Friends described them as a happy couple, though a few mentioned that Sandra had recently begun expressing doubts about the relationship, telling at least one friend that she planned to end things with Raymond soon. She never got the chance. Sandra vanished on a Thursday evening after telling her roommate she was going for a walk. She never returned. Her case, like Della's and Corinne's decades later, involved no clear evidence, no witnesses, and no trace of her whereabouts. The investigation at the time had questioned Raymond briefly as her boyfriend, but found no evidence linking him to her disappearance. Without a body, without witnesses, and without any physical evidence, the case eventually went cold. Sandra Kepler's file had sat untouched in that archive for nearly 30 years. Detective Alves stared at the old photograph clipped to the file. Sandra Kepler had dark hair, a warm smile, and eyes that reminded her uncomfortably of both Della Marsh and Corinne Whitfield. The similarities between all 3 women went beyond simple physical resemblance. All 3 were in their early 20s or early 30s. All 3 lived in or near Fairhaven. All 3 vanished without a trace, without struggle, without any evidence left behind. And all 3 had, at some point, crossed paths with Raymond Ostler. That it was no longer a small thread. It was becoming a rope. Detective Alves brought her findings to her supervisor and to the district attorney's office, carefully laying out the pattern she had uncovered. Everyone agreed that this was enough to justify a much closer, much more serious look at Raymond Osler, though everyone also agreed that circumstantial connections and old case files, however troubling, were still not enough to secure an arrest warrant. They needed something concrete. A piece of physical evidence, a witness, anything that could turn suspicion into proof. Detective Alves requested a warrant to formally question Raymond, along with limited access to certain areas of his property. citing the pattern of connections she had documented. The warrant was granted, though narrowly, given the largely circumstantial nature of the evidence so far. On a gray Tuesday morning, Detective Alves and two other officers drove to the house with the pale blue shutters at the end of Willow Creek Lane. Raymond answered the door in his usual manner, calm, welcoming, unbothered. He invited the officers inside without hesitation, offering them coffee, asking politely what this was about. Detective Alves explained that they were following up on several ongoing investigations and needed to ask him a few questions, given his known connections to both missing women through his work at the hardware store. Raymond's expression, according to Detective Alves' later notes, did not change. He answered every question smoothly, calmly, and with what appeared to be complete sincerity. He said he barely remembered either woman beyond their brief interactions as customers. He expressed sympathy for their families. He said he hoped, sincerely, that they would be found safe. If Detective Alves had not already uncovered the file on Sandra Kepler, she might have believed him entirely. His performance, if it was one, was seamless. But she had seen the file, and she noticed something small, something that most people might have missed entirely. On a shelf in Raymond's living room, among framed photographs of his parents and a few old friends, sat a single photograph of a young woman with dark hair and a warm smile, dressed in clothing that looked distinctly out of place among the otherwise modern collection of images. When Detective Alves asked who the woman in the photograph was, Raymond's calm expression flickered, just barely, for the first time. An old friend. Detective Alves recognized her immediately. It was Sandra Kepler. The room went quiet, and in that silence, Detective Alves understood with a growing certainty that she was no longer looking at a simple person of interest. She was looking at a man who had been carrying a secret for 30 years, hidden in plain sight behind a friendly smile and a well-tended tomato garden. What she didn't yet know was just how many more secrets that quiet house at the end of Willow Creek Lane was still hiding. The photograph of Sandra Kepler was not, by itself, enough to arrest Raymond Osler. Keeping an old photo of a former girlfriend was strange, perhaps, but not illegal. Detective Alves knew she needed something far stronger before she could move forward. She requested an expanded search warrant, citing the photograph, the pattern of connections to both missing women and the previously unexplained disappearance of Sandra Kepler nearly 30 years earlier. This time, given the mounting circumstantial evidence, the warrant was granted with broader scope, allowing investigators to search Raymond's entire property, including his garage, basement, and backyard garden. The search took place 3 days later, early on a cool morning, with Raymond present but not yet under arrest. He watched from his front porch, arms crossed, his expression unreadable as officers moved carefully through his home. Inside the garage, investigators found nothing unusual at first: gardening tools, old furniture, boxes of holiday decorations. But tucked behind a stack of paint cans, hidden inside a locked metal toolbox, officers found something that made the entire search shift in tone. Inside the toolbox were several personal items: a woman's wristwatch, a set of keys on a keychain shaped like a small silver bird, and a folded piece of fabric that appeared to be part of a scarf. None of these items belonged to Raymond. Forensic teams immediately bagged and tagged each item for testing. Within days, the wristwatch was confirmed, through engraving on its back, to belong to Corinne Whitfield, a gift from her late father. The scarf was identified by Della Marsh's mother as one she had given her daughter for her birthday the previous year. The keychain, once cleaned and examined more closely, was traced back through old county records to Sandra Kepler. 3 women, 3 sets of personal belongings, hidden together in a lockbox in Raymond Osler's garage. It was no longer circumstantial. It was direct physical evidence connecting Raymond to all 3 disappearances, spanning nearly 30 years. Detective Alves ordered Raymond's arrest on the spot, on charges related to the concealment of evidence and obstruction, while the investigation into the disappearances themselves continued at full speed. But the discovery in the toolbox was only the beginning. While searching the backyard, officers noticed something unusual about the layout of Raymond's tomato garden. Unlike the rest of the yard, which followed a natural, slightly uneven slope, the section beneath the tomato plants appeared strangely level, almost as if the ground had been deliberately flattened and reshaped at some point in the past. Cadaver dogs, brought in as part of the search, reacted strongly to this section of the yard, sitting and alerting their handlers exactly as they had been trained to do when detecting human remains. Detective Alves ordered an immediate excavation. Over the following 2 days, forensic teams carefully removed layer after layer of soil beneath Raymond's tomato garden, working with the same slow precision archaeologists might use on an ancient site. Neighbors gathered along the edges of the property, watching in stunned silence as officers in white protective suits moved carefully through what had once been a simple backyard vegetable patch. What they found, buried nearly 6 feet beneath the tomato plants Raymond had tended so carefully for years, confirmed everyone's worst fears. The remains of 3 individuals were discovered in that yard: Della Marsh, Corinne Whitfield, and, after nearly 30 years, Sandra Kepler. The town of Fairhaven, which had spent weeks searching wooded areas, fields, and the creek path, learned that the answer had been sitting quietly at the end of Willow Creek Lane the entire time, hidden beneath rows of ripening tomatoes that neighbors had admired for years. Vivian Hurst, the retired schoolteacher who had walked patrol with Raymond, later told a local reporter that she had eaten tomatoes from that garden the previous summer, a gift Raymond had brought to her front porch with his usual warm smile. "I think about that a lot," she said quietly. "I think about it more than I'd like to." As news of the discovery spread through Fairhaven and eventually across national headlines, one question echoed through every conversation in town. How had nobody noticed? How had a man capable of this kind of violence lived among them for decades, helping search for his own victims, walking safety patrols meant to protect the very community he had been quietly terrorizing? The answer to that question would only become clear once investigators began piecing together the full, disturbing timeline of Raymond Osler's life, a timeline that stretched back far further than anyone had imagined, and revealed a pattern of calculated violence hidden behind one of the most convincing masks anyone in Fairhaven had ever seen. In the days following the discovery in Raymond's backyard, Detective Alves and her team worked to build a complete picture of who Raymond Osler truly was, beneath the friendly, familiar exterior the town had known for so long. They interviewed his surviving family members, old classmates, former co-workers, and neighbors from across several decades. Slowly, a very different portrait began to emerge, one that had been hidden beneath the surface the entire time. Raymond had grown up in Fairhaven as an only child, raised by parents who were, by most accounts, distant and emotionally cold. Former neighbors from that era described a quiet, withdrawn boy who spent most of his time alone, rarely playing with other children, often observed watching from a distance rather than participating. A former teacher, now in her 80s, recalled an incident from Raymond's childhood that had stayed with her for decades. She described finding him at around age 10, calmly dissecting a small animal behind the school building, showing no visible distress or reaction, only quiet curiosity. At the time, she had reported the incident to his parents, who dismissed it as harmless boyhood curiosity. As Raymond grew older, those who knew him described the young man who was intelligent, controlled, and unusually skilled at presenting whatever version of himself a situation required. He could be charming when charm was useful, sympathetic when sympathy was needed, invisible when invisibility served him best. His relationship with Sandra Kepler, investigators learned, had followed a familiar pattern that would later repeat itself with tragic consequences. Friends of Sandra's, tracked down decades later, recalled that she had begun expressing discomfort with Raymond in the weeks before her disappearance, describing him as increasingly controlling and possessive. Though never violent in any way, she had noticed before it was too late. After Sandra's disappearance and the resulting investigation, which found no evidence to charge him, Raymond appeared to withdraw from any serious romantic relationships for many years. He built his life instead around routine and reputation. His job at the hardware store, his small kindnesses toward neighbors, his carefully cultivated image as a helpful, harmless fixture of Fairhaven's daily life. Investigators believe this image was not simply who Raymond happened to be. It was a mask he built deliberately, brick by brick, over decades, precisely because he understood how effectively it would protect him. Forensic psychologists who later reviewed the case described Raymond as displaying calculated, controlled patterns of behavior consistent with what is sometimes called predatory violence, a form of harm that is planned and deliberate rather than impulsive or emotional. Unlike crimes driven by sudden anger, this kind of violence often involves patience, careful selection of victims, and a long period of planning before any action is taken. This pattern helped explain why Raymond had waited so long between incidents. After Sandra Kepler in his 20s, decades passed with no other known victims. A gap investigators believe was less about restraint and more about extreme caution, patience, and the careful construction of his safe, trusted reputation in Fairhaven. It was only decades later, once that reputation was fully established and his sense of confidence in his own invisibility had grown, that Raymond began again. First with Della Marsh and then with Corinne Whitfield, choosing women who fit a similar profile to Sandra, independent, well-liked in the community, and crucially, women whose paths crossed his own through the ordinary routines of small-town life. Detective Alves, reflecting later on the investigation, noted something that stayed with her long after the case concluded. The most dangerous thing about Raymond Osler wasn't his violence, she said. Plenty of violent people exist in the world, and most of them are caught relatively quickly because they can't control themselves well enough to hide what they've done. What made Raymond different was his patience and his understanding of exactly how trust works in a place like Fairhaven. He knew that if people liked him, they would stop looking. And for almost 30 years, he was right. But even the most carefully built mask eventually shows a crack. And as the investigation moved from Raymond's past toward the courtroom, one final piece of evidence would emerge, buried not in soil, but in Raymond's own words that would finally reveal the full, chilling truth of what had happened to Sandra Kepler, Della Marsh, and Corinne Whitfield. As forensic teams completed their examination of the remains found beneath Raymond's garden, a clearer picture of what had happened to each woman slowly came into focus, pieced together through careful analysis and methodical investigation. Forensic evidence indicated that each woman had been restrained before her death, though the exact circumstances of each case differed slightly, reflecting what investigators believed was an evolving pattern over the decades between incidents. Evidence at the scene, combined with the personal items recovered from Raymond's garage, strongly suggested that Raymond had approached each woman using his trusted, familiar reputation as a way to lower their guard before the situation turned violent. Detective Alves was careful, both during the investigation and in her later public statements, not to share every graphic detail uncovered by the forensic team, out of respect for the victims' families and the ongoing legal process. What she did confirm was that the evidence overwhelmingly supported a clear and disturbing conclusion. Raymond Osler had planned each encounter carefully, using his reputation, his knowledge of the town, and his understanding of each woman's routine to create opportunities that appeared, from the outside, completely unremarkable. During formal questioning, following his arrest, Raymond initially denied any involvement, maintaining the same calm, controlled demeanor that had served him so well for decades. He claimed the items found in his garage had been given to him or found by him, offering vague, shifting explanations for each one. But confronted with the forensic evidence from the excavation, along with the timeline investigators had built connecting him directly to both recent victims through security footage and employment records, Raymond's composure finally began to break. According to court documents later made public, Raymond eventually admitted, in a lengthy interview with investigators, to his involvement in all 3 disappearances. Though he continued to minimize and rationalize his actions throughout the interview, describing his victims in detached, unsettling terms that further confirmed the psychological assessments made about his character. He described Sandra Kepler's death 30 years earlier as something that had happened almost by accident during an argument that escalated beyond his control. Investigators, however, noted that the careful, deliberate nature of how her remains had been concealed suggested significant premeditation, contradicting Raymond's own account of events. Regarding Della Marsh and Corinne Whitfield, Raymond admitted that both encounters had been planned in advance, describing in unsettling detail how he had used his position at the hardware store to learn small pieces of information about each woman's routine, information that later helped him identify moments when he could approach them without being seen. Perhaps most disturbing to investigators was Raymond's own explanation for why he had waited so many years between incidents. "I knew if I was patient," he reportedly told investigators, "nobody would ever think to look at me." For nearly 30 years, he had been right. The full weight of this admission settled heavily over the entire town of Fairhaven once details became public. Neighbors who had once trusted Raymond with spare keys invited him into their homes and worked alongside him during search efforts and safety patrols. Were forced to confront the disturbing reality that the man they had known for decades had, in fact, been hiding an entirely different person underneath. Vivian Hurst, reflecting on those late-night patrols she had walked alongside Raymond, later described a chilling realization. "We were out there every night, looking for whoever had taken those women," she said. "And the whole time, he was walking right beside us, listening to every theory we came up with, nodding along like he was just as worried as the rest of us." As the investigation moved toward prosecution, Detective Alves and the district attorney's office began preparing what would become one of the most closely watched criminal trials in the region's history. A case that would force the entire town of Fairhaven to publicly reckon with just how completely they had been deceived. But even as legal proceedings moved forward, one final, unanswered question continued to weigh on investigators and residents alike. Were Sandra, Della, and Corinne truly the only victims? Or had 30 years of careful, patient violence left behind other names that had simply never been connected? With Raymond Osler in custody and formally charged with multiple counts of murder, investigators turned their attention to a difficult and painstaking task, determining whether any other disappearances across the decades of Raymond's life in Fairhaven might also be connected to him. Detective Alves led a renewed review of cold case files from the surrounding region, searching specifically for unsolved disappearances involving women who fit a similar profile to Sandra, Della, and Corinne, spanning back through the entire 30-year period during which Raymond had lived and worked in the area. This process required extensive cooperation between multiple jurisdictions, since Raymond, though he had spent most of his life in Fairhaven, was known to have taken occasional trips to nearby towns for work-related errands, family visits, and other ordinary purposes over the years. 2 additional cases emerged as possible connections, both involving young women who had gone missing in neighboring counties, roughly a decade and 2 decades earlier, respectively. In both instances, investigators found some circumstantial links to Raymond, including receipts, employment travel records, or witness statements placing him in the general area at the approximate time of each disappearance. However, unlike the 3 confirmed cases, investigators were unable to find any physical evidence directly connecting Raymond to these 2 additional disappearances. Extensive searches of other properties he had access to over the years, including a family property he had inherited and later sold, turned up nothing conclusive. Detective Alves was careful to communicate to the families of these 2 women that, while a connection to Raymond could not be entirely ruled out, there was not enough evidence to formally include these cases in the charges against him. "We owe it to every family involved to be completely honest about what we can and cannot prove," she said during a press briefing addressing public speculation about these additional cases. "It would be irresponsible to claim certainty where certainty doesn't exist, even if the pattern feels deeply troubling." This careful, measured approach, while frustrating to some families desperate for answers, reflected the same methodical precision that had ultimately led to Raymond's capture in the first place. Detective Alves understood that certainty, in cases like this, mattered as much as justice itself, both for the victims already confirmed and for the integrity of the broader investigation. Throughout this period, Raymond remained largely uncooperative regarding these additional cases, offering vague, non-committal responses whenever investigators raised the possibility of other victims. Some interpreted his silence as a final attempt to maintain some small measure of control, even after his other secrets had been fully exposed. Others believed it was simply confirmation that no further victims existed and that Raymond, having nothing more to hide, had no reason to continue the conversation. The truth of those 2 additional cases remains unresolved to this day, a haunting reminder that even the most thorough investigations sometimes leave lingering questions behind. What was certain, however, was the overwhelming weight of evidence connecting Raymond directly to the deaths of Sandra Kepler, Della Marsh, and Corinne Whitfield. As the criminal trial approached, the town of Fairhaven prepared itself for a painful, public reckoning with the truth about the man they had once considered one of their most trusted neighbors. And as that trial finally began, one moment inside the courtroom would capture, more clearly than anything else in the entire case, exactly how deeply Raymond Osler's carefully built mask had deceived an entire community for nearly 3 decades. The trial of Raymond Osler began nearly 8 months after his arrest, held at the county courthouse roughly 30 minutes from Fairhaven. Given the intense local and national attention the case had received, court officials arranged for additional security and overflow seating to accommodate the large number of reporters, family members, and concerned residents who wished to attend. Detective Alves testified early in the proceedings, walking the jury carefully through the entire investigation, from the discovery of the hardware store receipts to the final excavation beneath Raymond's tomato garden. Her testimony was detailed, precise, and, according to several courtroom observers, deeply unsettling in its methodical clarity. Forensic experts testified regarding the physical evidence recovered from the scene, carefully explaining, without unnecessary graphic detail, how the evidence supported the timeline and circumstances investigators had pieced together for each victim. Perhaps the most emotionally difficult testimony came from the families of Della Marsh, Corinne Whitfield, and Sandra Kepler, each of whom spoke about the impact of losing their loved ones. both in the immediate aftermath of each disappearance and across the years, or in Sandra's case, decades of uncertainty that followed. Della's mother spoke about the daily phone calls she and her daughter used to share, describing the lasting, hollow silence that had replaced them. Corinne's parents spoke about her dedication to her nursing career and the patients she had cared for, who still remembered her kindness. Sandra Kepler's younger sister, now in her late 50s, spoke about growing up without ever knowing what had truly happened to her sister, describing the strange, painful relief of finally having an answer, even one as devastating as this. Throughout the trial, Raymond remained largely composed, occasionally showing brief flashes of emotion during particularly difficult testimony, though many courtroom observers noted that his reactions often seemed carefully measured rather than genuinely spontaneous, consistent with the calculated behavior investigators had described throughout the case. The defense attempted to argue that Raymond's confession had been improperly obtained, and that certain pieces of circumstantial evidence, particularly regarding the 2 additional unresolved cases, should not be allowed to influence the jury's perception of the confirmed charges. The judge ultimately agreed to exclude any direct reference to those 2 unresolved cases during the trial itself, limiting the proceedings strictly to the 3 confirmed victims. After 11 days of testimony, the case went to the jury. The jury deliberated for just under 2 days before returning with their verdict: guilty on all counts related to the deaths of Sandra Kepler, Della Marsh, and Corinne Whitfield. The courtroom, packed with family members, reporters, and residents from Fairhaven, remained largely silent as the verdict was read, though several witnesses later described quiet sobbing among the victims' families, a mixture of grief and long overdue relief. Raymond Osler showed almost no visible reaction as the verdict was announced, maintaining the same calm, controlled expression he had carried throughout the entire trial. During his sentencing hearing several weeks later, Raymond was given the opportunity to address the court. He offered a brief, carefully worded statement, expressing what he described as regret for the pain he had caused, though many in the courtroom, including several family members, later said the statement felt hollow, more focused on managing his own image than on any genuine remorse. Raymond Osler was ultimately sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As officers led him from the courtroom for the final time, several reporters noted a strange, unsettling detail. He paused briefly near the exit, turned back toward the gallery, and offered the same warm, familiar smile that neighbors on Willow Creek Lane had known for decades. It was, several witnesses later said, the most disturbing moment of the entire trial. In the months following Raymond Osler's conviction, the town of Fairhaven was forced to confront a difficult, uncomfortable truth about itself. For nearly 3 decades, one of its most trusted residents had been living a completely different life beneath the surface, and almost nobody had noticed. The house at the end of Willow Creek Lane, once admired for its tidy garden and welcoming porch, sat empty for a long time after Raymond's arrest, eventually purchased by the county and demolished, along with the garden where 3 women had been buried for so long. In its place, the town eventually built a small memorial garden, planted with flowers rather than vegetables, dedicated to Sandra Kepler, Della Marsh, and Corinne Whitfield. Detective Alves, reflecting on the case sometime after the trial concluded, offered a perspective that many residents found both difficult to hear and impossible to forget. People want to believe that dangerous individuals look dangerous, she said. That there's always some obvious sign, some warning we simply missed because we weren't paying close enough attention. But the truth is often much harder to accept. Sometimes the most dangerous people are dangerous precisely because they know exactly how to appear safe. This idea, uncomfortable as it was, became a central part of how Fairhaven slowly began processing what had happened. Community meetings were held, not just to discuss safety measures going forward, but to openly discuss the deeper, more unsettling questions the case had raised about trust, familiarity, and the assumptions people make about the people living closest to them. Vivian Hurst, who had spent so many nights walking safety patrols alongside Raymond without ever suspecting the truth, became an advocate for greater awareness within the community. Speaking at local events about the importance of taking subtle warning signs seriously, even when they come from people who seem completely trustworthy. "I'm not saying we should stop trusting our neighbors," she said during one such event. "I'm saying we should trust our instincts a little more, even when they contradict what everyone else around us seems to believe." For the families of Sandra Kepler, Della Marsh, and Corinne Whitfield, the conviction brought a measure of closure, though nothing that could truly undo the pain of their loss. Della's mother continued working at the diner where her daughter once served customers, saying it helped her feel closer to Della's memory. Corinne's parents established a small scholarship fund in her name, supporting nursing students at the same hospital where she had worked. Sandra Kepler's sister, finally able to properly grieve after 30 years of uncertainty, arranged for her sister to be laid to rest beside their parents in a quiet cemetery just outside of town. Fairhaven itself slowly began to heal, though its sense of complete, unquestioning safety never fully returned. Neighbors still waved from their porches, but many now paid closer attention to small details they might once have overlooked. Doors that had once gone unlocked were now locked out of habit. Conversations between neighbors sometimes carried a quiet awareness that had not existed before, an unspoken understanding that appearances, however convincing, do not always reflect the truth of who someone really is. Detective Alves, in her final public statement on the case, offered words that many residents of Fairhaven would carry with them long after the story faded from national headlines. "This case wasn't solved because someone acted suspiciously," she said. "It was solved because we refused to stop asking questions, even when the answers seemed impossible. That's the lesson here, I think. Not that we should live in fear of our neighbors, but that we should never be too comfortable to keep looking closely, especially when something doesn't quite add up." The story of Raymond Osler remains, for many who lived through it, a quiet, lingering reminder that evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it simply waters its tomato garden, waves from its porch, and waits patiently for exactly the right moment. If you enjoyed this original mystery story, like the video, subscribe for more, and turn on notifications for future psychological thrillers, unsolved mysteries, and fictional true crime-inspired tales. Until next time, sleep carefully.